All right, y'all. Good morning. This is take number 2. This is 8:30 or 8:20, 8:16 on a Saturday morning. I originally set out to make this at 7:30, but 2 of my 4 children woke up, so I had to quick pause it and make some breakfast. So this morning, I'm caffeinated up. A little shameless plug. Ariel Resupply Coffee Roasters, veteran-owned, fantastic brew. So if you need to pick me up, let me know, and I'll send you a link to get some of this incredible coffee. Anyway, this video was inspired by the discussion question that I just had for one of my classes, and essentially what we had to do is go to an automatic generator, an online generator, data generator, where the context is M&Ms. So if you look at the left-hand side of my screen, you'll see red, orange, blue, green, yellow, and brown. Essentially what the simulator does, it'll give you an output of random values for each of these things. So essentially think about it like you're getting a bag of M&Ms and these represent the content of that particular bag. So there's some business implications that could come from this, but for all intents and purposes, what I want to do is I want to show you how to leverage Excel to calculate the standard deviation. And I'm going to do it a couple of different ways because obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but Excel has some functions built in where you can calculate the standard deviation with, I don't know, 7 keystrokes. But what I want to do is I want to break down the standard deviation formula to help you sort of get a stronger grasp of how that works. And in this specific example, we'll be using the equation for a sample set, which is a slight deviation from the population. Anyway, the first thing we want to do here is we want to fill in the relative frequency table. And the way that we calculate the relative frequency is we take the frequency of each category and we divide it by the total number of elements in this data set. So the first thing we need to do is we need to calculate the total of this data set. So there's a variety of different ways we can do it. We could highlight it here and click this auto sum button on the right and click sum. Another way that we can do it is we can type in sum and then we can put a parenthesis and then select all of the cells that we want to take the sum or include in the sum and then hit enter. So remember, anytime that you're wanting to write an equation or a function, you need to click the equal sign or a formula. A lot of these terms are interchangeable. So anytime that you want Excel to compute a mathematical operation, you need to click the equal sign in that given cell. So there's a slight trick here, and I'm going to show you an example of when an error message occurs, and I'm going to show you how and why you should fix it. So here we define the relative frequency by taking the frequency and dividing it by the total number of elements in this data set. So here the frequency for red is in cell B2 and the total number of elements lives in B9. So we've got B2 divided by B9, which is going to give me a relative frequency of 0.08 with 3 repeating. Now, a cool thing about Excel is we can then transition this formula to each of these cells below by clicking the right-hand corner here and dragging it down. Now, you're going to see an error come up when I do this. So that tells me that there's some issues here. And if you look, this is B2 divided by B9, this is B3 divided by B10, B4 by B11, so on and so forth. So as I drag this cell down, it's taking these frequency tables and adjusting accordingly, so that works out okay. But what is also happening is it's starting in this cell right here, and it continues to drag down to these empty cells. And we know that when we divide anything by 0, it's undefined. So one thing that we can do in Excel is we can click here, and if we want this B7, well, yeah, it's B9, whatever. If we want B9, click on this one right here. If we want B9 to be in every single cell below here, what you can do is you can put the dollar symbol in between the B and the 9, and that's going to make it so it's locked in on that B9 cell. And even though the numerator will change, the denominator will not. Okay. Now, one thing that we should double check is we should make sure that our relative frequency has a sum of 1, because that is the nature of what needs to happen. So in order for it to be a true frequency distribution, we want to make sure that the sum of all of our relative frequencies is equal to 1, and we have that here, so we're in good shape. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to calculate the mean, because that is how we're going to calculate one of the steps that we're going to use to calculate our standard deviation. So the mean in this situation is essentially going to be the mean value for each of these data sets. So what is, in statistics we don't like to use the word average, but essentially what is the average number of average quantity of each color. So what we can do here is we call this X bar, which is the mean, and what we'll do is click equals, and we'll type in average, and then what we're going to do is we're going to click on B2 cell, which contains the number of red, and we're going to hold shift, and we're going to scroll down to the bottom one. We're going to close that out with parentheses. So it looks like the mean for each of these categories is going to be 10, which essentially the average number of M&Ms found in each category will be 10. Obviously, this orange skews the data pretty significantly, but that's beside the point right now. So if you look over here to columns F and G, you'll notice that I have a column called X minus X bar, and then X minus X bar squared. Because what we're going to do here is we're going to replicate the formula. So essentially what we need to do is we need to take the difference between this data point, this data value, and the mean, and then we want to square it. So, nope, I didn't do this work. Let me clear this out. So we want X minus X bar. So what we're going to do is the frequency represents the X value minus this cell B12 contains our X bar. And if you remember, we want to put a dollar sign in between, because as we pull this down, we want to make sure that X bar stays the same. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we have these values here. Alright, so what we've got going on here is we've got that X minus X bar. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to square it. So when we square the values, we're just going to multiply it by itself. And there's a function for that, or a formula, but if we just want to multiply the cell by itself, we type in the cell name, cell number, and we multiply by itself. So -5 times -5 is 25, 9 times 9 is going to be 81, so on and so forth. Okay, so that gives us a major part of the formula. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to take the summation, which is that funky looking E. And we do that by saying sum, parenthesis, these values here. Alright, so essentially the way the formula works is we take this summation and we divide it by n minus 1. In this case we have 6 color categories, so we're going to take our summation, 220, and divide it by 6 minus 1, which is 5. And then that gives you the variance. So to find the standard deviation, we take the square root of that value, bada bing, bada boom. I don't like that because that doesn't make sense. Alright, so let's try this again. So make sure we got all of those squared. So we've got square root of this divided by 5. There it is. I don't know what the deal was there. Maybe I accidentally typed in 6. So this is going to be our standard deviation. Now the cool thing about Excel is we can actually calculate the standard deviation using a formula, deviation. So the formula we can use is equals standard dev. So we're going to take that. Now we're going to identify all of the frequencies that we want to include, and this is where that math magic comes into play. Look at that. 6.6332496, 6.332.496. Now watch what happens if I extend this. Boom. It's the same exact thing. So when you're wanting to calculate standard deviation, it's important to know how the process works, especially if you're working with a population or a sample. But just know that we have tools that are available to do some of this work. And the biggest thing you're going to want to do is make this frequency distribution table. And that's going to be sort of your home base. And then we can use this table of values to do all kinds of analyses. So hopefully this was helpful. I definitely look forward to hearing what you have to say. And if you're in my class, let me know if you have any additional questions or feedback with regards to this content and how it's helping with the work that we're doing. Anyway, have a fantastic Saturday, and I'm sure I'll see some of you later.